Hello there, and we are on episode 36 of Trek Prime. Welcome to it. Get that a little backwards, but it's when you're seeing this, it'll be a new month. It'll be February, and we're only a few months away from our first year anniversary, so I'm
Yep.
pretty happy about that. And like I said, for different reasons, trying to get this running. We had a lot of episodes we didn't produce because we were trying to figure out the format for this. We originally did it together in the same room, and we eventually settled on Zoom here. And
Yeah.
it turns out, when I was we did an episode recently about the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, and it was through that I found out about this very interesting period in Star Trek history that dealt with unproduction, a series that never got produced. And they were talking about how the actors and actresses on Star Trek had been told they'd be doing Star Trek again during the course of the 70s. And of course, there was an animated show that came out of that. But I wanted to start out by saying something that I was just talking to you about that I saw in a documentary about Phase 2 that came from The Source. Star Trek, the TOS was canceled by NBC in 1969. Here's something interesting, and this goes right into the source of what we're talking about here. When Star Trek ended, was canceled. The TV rating system at the time was going by something called the Nielsen's. You either had TVs that had boxes in them, or you could buy them. And so it was an estimated group of TV viewers, but apparently people who got Nielsen boxes were middle-aged people who were into westerns or soap operas or talk shows, because Star Trek wasn't getting good numbers in the Nielsen's. But when they looked out at the world, they found out that a lot of young college students, particularly young boys apparently, were watching Star Trek in sufficient numbers where if they had been measured, Star Trek could have easily stayed on the air. And apparently Star Trek was, cancellation came just a year before TV stopped measuring by Nielsen's and started measuring by demographics the way they do today.
Yeah.
So Star Trek, nobody's sure if Star Trek created that, but you got to wonder if Star Trek actually changed the way audiences were measured on TV.
Yeah.
Because we've heard before that Star Trek had an audience among a younger demographic more than the Nielsen rating they were using. So you got to wonder if that had a blood to play into it. But eventually in 1976, 77, a group of producers, including Harold Livingston and Robert Goodman, and people like Matt Jefferies and William Worth, these were basically, called upon to do a new series that apparently Gene Roddenberry didn't want it to do. And the tentative title for it was going to be called Star Trek Phase 2, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, just speculation. Do you think if the show had actually made it to air, they would have kept the name Phase 2?
I think that was the working title. I think they were going to probably just have it underneath Star Trek Phase 2.
Well, I hate to get out of canon or out of Prime, whatever, but I noticed when they were referring to the fourth Kelvin Universe movie, they were referring to it as Star Trek 4. And, when I think of Star Trek 4, I think of The Voyage Home.
Yeah.
But they're just using a generic number to describe a movie that wasn't made yet.
Yeah.
I think if you remember, Star Trek Beyond was referred to Star Trek 3 as a while.
Yeah.
I don't know about Into Darkness, but anyway. So I don't know. Phase 2, I don't know. It sounds like a weird name for a Star Trek series. But that was a working title, but it did not get produced. Basically, if I understand it, they took the series to the head of, I believe it was Paramount. I believe it was Michael Eisner, actually. Yeah, that Michael Eisner. And he threw the script down and said this would make a great motion picture. And they went the motion picture route.
Yeah.
But they designed sets. They started designing a new ship. I believe that a guy named Mike Miner was involved in designing the new Enterprise. And I believe he was. And they hired new people, including Persis Khambatta as Ilea. And Leonard Nimoy did not want to be involved in the series. So they...
they had a new
they had an actor named David Gatrow, who you might know as I think it was Lieutenant Masters in the motion picture.
Yeah, he was the head of the Epsilon 9 station.
Right, and evidently his character got processed into data patterns. But I mean, if you go online, you'll see pictures of Mr. Gatrow dressed up as Zahn, who was a full Vulcan, not a half Vulcan like Spock. Okay, so Phase 2 is a really broad subject, and I don't like to say this, but my research on it this week was incredibly poor. I don't know if you looked anything up.
I just, over the years, I've read things here and there about it. I seen that the book, a copy of that book you got there. That
right. And I was going to bring this is the book, and I just feel really bad. The week didn't go as expected. I'm just going to say that to be a little curmudgeonly. So this is really, really poorly researched. So I guess the only thing we can do is just speculate on what the series might have been, rather than go into too many production details, because
they had the thing I liked is some of the pictures in that book. They showed what they had drawn out for ideas for sets. They had some pretty radical looking things.
Yes, and that's what I was going to mention to you, because like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here. Now, first of all, I'm going to leap into current Star Trek again, because when they were first designing the new Enterprise, before they settled on the more recognizable Mike Miner one, which you see here, it's sort of a mixture of the original and the motion picture design. They were going with a design that looked like that. Look familiar to anybody out there? So yeah, I mean that's the origin of that. And they have these pictures of the bridge, and it's not unlike motion picture one in all the ways.
Yeah.
They were kind of going for that environment.
Yeah, the uniforms didn't look like they were going to change that much from the TOS episodes. It was just going to be very slight changes to costuming and stuff. But the sets were really going to look different, When
I looked at the main engineering, one thing I noticed is that at the end of the day, they more or less reused this engineering for Voyager.
Yeah.
I mean, they changed those big, giant orb things around, but basically that's the Voyager engineering for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And it would have begun the whole thing of the vertical warp core.
Yeah.
I was watching a thing over on Trek Yards. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Samuel. About, they were talking about the Enterprise Connie, the TOS Connie, does in fact have a vertical warp core. We just don't see it. So that's apparently a thing now. But yeah, so again, here's Persis Khambatta in her original ILEA idea. And as you can see, they're kind of TOS-y uniforms.
Yeah. I think the gold one looks better on her than the red one. So
test shots. So yeah, you're right. And like I say, here's some test shots of the engineering section. Yeah. When I see the way the actors are dressed in their decor, it's all very Buck Rogers, Space 1999, Logan's Run era.
Yeah.
But that was all happening around then. So Battlestar Galactica. This was.
I have to say that the picture that in that back of the warp core, I guess I don't know if they were going to call it a warp core, but it looks a lot more advanced than even what they used on Next Generation for a warp core. You know what I'm saying? I mean, doesn't that look like really, really, like even beyond 23rd century?
Except if you look closely, the shape is very much kind of advanced looking. But if you look at the textures of it, it's still very machine-like and TOS-y in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just a different shape, but it still has that TOS-y blocky look.
Yeah.
It just looks a little more advanced, but you can see underneath it, it has that kind of pulsing thing that you have in the motion picture.
Yeah. The plasma feed.
They actually had this little thing. I don't know if it was going to be their phaser, this little electronic gun thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a phaser. It was a little sloppier.
Probably like an engineering tool or something.
But some of the things were flat out going to be motion picture-like that thing.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff actually made it more or less of the movie. Now, here's a mock-up of Matt Jeffries' version of the Enterprise Connie. Now, as you can see, it has some elements that are similar to the classic Connie and the refit one. It's kind of a mixture between the two. And I guess Mike Miner must have designed the model that Eaglemoss is making. See, like I said, I didn't research this, so
yeah.
I feel like crap.
Well, the thing of it is, there's a lot of pictures that are really going to explain better than we could about how things are going to look. I mean, at the top, you can see on the bridge, they got 2 turbo lifts instead of just
Right,
one.
they call it the Mickey Mouse effect. So
yeah.
And apparently, a shuttlecraft was designed that I found interesting because it looks like a Cessna.
Doesn't that look like something from Enterprise?
Yeah, it does. You know, and now that I think about it, it looks like the shuttle pod on Enterprise, but the wings are longer. They're not as small.
Yeah.
But it has an Enterprise-y kind of look. So, like
Yeah.
I said, they were designing a model. They actually have a model they were designing right here. So
Yeah. I'm wondering if that model eventually became the model we see in the motion picture, if they just kept at, fixing it up. And
here's the funny thing. That space helmet thing, that isn't what they have in the motion picture. But again, it looks an awful lot like what they're doing now. So, yeah, I find it amazing that that's the way they're doing. So those are just some pictures from that era. There's actually some more in here that I can kind of go into as far as pictures are concerned. Like I said, this was a series that was in the rudimentary stages of design before they actually kind of cut it off. But I always wonder if it would have morphed into something that resembled the motion picture or not.
Well, like I said, they had the first episode in Die Image was what became motion pictures storyline, I think. They had
Right,
that in
and there's a lot of details in here. As I said, I planned to digest this book during the course of the week, but I didn't. So if any of you out there are big Phase 2 people, forgive my lack of research, but I'm committed to doing this. But basically, I'm just going to go with some episode ideas. And because, like I said, there are scripts, but they're not even in that book, but just the ideas they had. And just in my image is basically the motion picture with some differences. I haven't read that book yet. I know this is a lot of self-doubt here, but would it be appropriate to do a Phase 2 Part 2?
Oh.
Have more research.
I'm well, really there's really not. How can I say this? You could read the book and get stuff out of it that some people might not know, but the knowledge of Phase 2, it's been around for such a long time that I don't even think I could find anything about it that really a lot of Star Trek fans probably don't already know about it. And, unless, they're like really young people or something. But what's interesting about, the events around Phase 2 is when they were working on that, when Star Wars came out, all of Hollywood was abuzz with trying to come out with things that were Star Wars like. And if you watched any of the science fiction in that time period, you're going to see there was a lot of crap science fiction. There was a lot of good science fiction made just because Star Wars was so big at the time, that it basically shelved Phase 2 permanently. And Paramount would not do a series for 10 years after that because they wanted to go movie route because it was such a big thing, where Star Wars was coming out, like every couple of years with a movie. And so Paramount felt they had to match it, so we didn't get a real Star Trek series until 1987. And they drew a lot from Phase 2, the ideas from Phase 2, especially some of the story ideas. They drew a lot from that to start the next generation. Like, you said the first episode in season 2 of TNG was ripped out of the Phase 2 idea.
And the child was part of Phase 2. And, of course, one of the parallels was that the Decker-Ilia dichotomy inevitably became Riker and Troy.
Yeah.
And apparently, except for now, I just wanted to add, and this is not exactly a plug, but I believe that somebody actually adapted some of these stories from Phase 2 into an internet series called Star Trek Phase 2.
Yeah, they did.
Including the child, I believe. So, I haven't seen it. I know there's a lot of Star Trek fan series out there, some in higher quality than others, but, and I'm not talking about Axanar because that's part of today's mess. So,
yeah.
I don't like calling today's Star Trek today's mess. That's what it is. It's today's mess. It's just, in terms of what Phase 2 was, at least there was an idea and it didn't happen, but it wasn't a disaster.
Well, here's the thing about Phase 2 is that when they were working on Phase 2, the canon of Star Trek only went far as TOS. Okay,
Right.
so there
It
wasn't a
was
whole.
like the classic Coke of Star. There was only one Coke. There was only one Star
They
Trek.
didn't have 50 years of stuff to stamp all over to ruin. So they had the whole new series ready to go. All they had was the 3 years of TOS and some animated episodes, and basically they could start basically at ground zero, and because they were going to start a whole nother 5-year mission. So everything after that could have all been new territory. Nothing really could have been treaded over. They weren't going to change these characters. They're bringing some of the original actors back. They were basically bringing some of the writers back, as far as I know, and they were going to just continue on the series, I think, in the style that they had started. It was just going to look a little better because it was being produced with newer test systems and stuff.
A lot of the episodes of Phase 2 seem to be shows that would have the scripts that would have kind of carried over to other Star Trek series in addition to Next Generation.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Well, this is just an episode that kind of reflected an older Star Trek. The second one that was written was called Tomorrow and the Stars, and apparently the Klingons factored very big in Phase 2 too. So now I'm speculating. Do you think the Klingons in Phase 2 would have just been the TOS kind of Klingons? Or do you think they would have gone with the Klingons that we saw in the motion picture?
You know what? Because I remember reading something in about the TOS, and I think originally they wanted the Klingons to have more makeup, to have the ridges or something with their head, and they didn't have the money to do it at the time. But I think if they would have done Phase 2, I think they probably would have went ahead and done it. Because remember how very brief we saw the Klingons in the motion picture, but they still took that extra step to make that headpiece.
So you think that if they'd done Phase 2, they would have done them that way?
I think they would have done it the same.
And that was part of the plan back in TOS?
Yes, I think that's what they were trying to do it then, but they didn't have the money to quite do it, so they had to just give them, mustache and a beard or whatever, and make.
And then explain it away in Enterprise somehow.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is that So, basically, the second episode was during a Klingon attack. Kirk orders an emergency beam up and ends up in Pearl Harbor just before the 1941 attack, and falls in love with a woman living there, and basically is sitting on the edge of forever without you-know-who. It's written by Larry Alexander, if you want to know the truth of it.
Without the tornado, you mean?
Tornado?
Without the tornado. Harlan Ellison.
I'm sorry, I was a little lost. Like I said, well, you mentioned him, so we were just talking about him before this. So and it dragged on, and he could dominate this whole podcast. But
yeah,
we're not even doing a podcast on Harlan Ellison because I don't want one that goes on 9 hours. So.
Oh God, yeah.
Like I say, not to speak ill of the dead, but he could be his own kind of oppression. So.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway, like I said, the next one was an episode called Cassandra, which is basically a take on an old Greek myth, which, I noticed that if you look back in TOS history, they had like, Who Mourns for Adonis, where they brought Apollo into it. So that just kind of extended on, Star Trek's take on myth.
As far as I know, I think they were planning on doing a follow-up to that episode from TOS when they were going to do Phase 2, but, it was one of those other stories. Yeah, they wanted to do that, and eventually, they did it when they did Star Trek Continues, was their first episode, and I think that story was largely, was the one that, DC Fontana had written out originally to be a follow-up to Apollo. We were supposed to find out what happened to him.
Why was that Apollo just kind of died?
No, he didn't. He didn't die. No.
Because he was talking to these other ones who had faded into the stars and what had happened.
Yeah, it left us with that, did he die or not? But apparently he didn't. So in Star Trek Continues, they picked up that story. Eventually what was going to be made in Phase 2 to find out what became of Apollo, they wrote it for that Star Trek fan episode that they made. Star Trek Continues, I think.
Well, I'm wondering another thing. I know that they only used him in the last two, in two of the first 2 seasons of the show. Season 3 didn't have Harry Mudd in it. Now, the weird thing is that looking back at Season 3 of TOS, if they brought Harry Mudd into it, he probably would have been the rational one that year.
Yeah, really.
But I mean, just matching up with Shatner that year would have been weird. But I wonder if they're planning on a Harry Mudd thing in Phase 2.
He was like, they could have made him like a recurring character, and
He was kind of like Q in a way.
Yeah, like every season they'd have a Harry Mudd episode or something like that. I don't know. I mean, that's something
They
they
were
could
kind
have
of doing TOS, but they kind of didn't do him in the third season. So
yeah. So I was surprised that they didn't do it for season 3. They didn't have an episode written.
It was in the animated series, which a lot of people consider season 4. So
yeah. I mean, he came back and did a voice for.
Yeah, and if you consider TOS to be, the animated series to be canon, Mudd's Passion is canon. So
you can't get any more TOS than having all the same actors and the people behind the TOS to do the animated.
Actually, you know what? Let me make a note to self. Next time my turn comes up, we should talk about the animated series.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't think of that, because I have way more knowledge of that than I do Phase 2, and there's actually shows to talk about.
Yeah.
And there's characters to talk about. So let's do the animated series to the next time I have a turn. Keep that in my mind. But anyway, so the next one is called Katoomba, and it's another Klingon episode where
that was another episode they actually did on YouTube.
The Enterprise is set to go to the Klingon homeworld. I'm wondering if they're going to call it Katoomba or something.
They called it Katoomba for the YouTube fan film that they made. It was actually pretty good. It was a pretty good little.
They did Katoomba in a fan episode too?
Yes, they did. It wasn't done by the people that did Star Trek Continues. It was another group that did it before them.
Is that the Phase 2 one I was mentioning?
Yeah, that was one of the episodes. It's actually pretty good. If anyone can find it on YouTube, you should watch it, because
I'm wondering, because there was all these weird names for the Klingon homeworld. I remember in TNG they actually called it Kling.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, they actually go right into the Klingon Empire, and you see all these different battleships and stuff like that. You get to see, actually one of the actors from Star Trek Continues plays a Klingon in that episode. Him and his wife, they're both in that. So it's really pretty good. It's just at the end there's this big fight, which is kind of funny because it looks like everybody's fighting inside of a closet, because you got people with batlets, and there's like people like if they move their arm they're gonna bash somebody in the head. There's no green screen. It's almost as campy as like TOS was when it started. So was
it intentional, or was it a production expanded?
I think it was just they just didn't have maybe the space they needed or the money they needed to make the room bigger or something. But it was like everybody was having this great big brawl inside this room that ain't no bigger than than a closet, and it was like you got people swinging swords and all that, and they're like hitting each other. It's like
we're talking about Phase 2. Now we're talking about a simulacra done by fans. But
yeah, I know, but it's just that story gets it's a good story. It really is a good story. It's just
done in a very TOS-ish sort of way.
Yeah, it's filmed. It has the same bridge and everything and all that, because they made their own sets, and all the sets look just like the way they looked in the '60s, and it's a very good story, and they did as good as they could do with with the money that they had on hand to do it. So I mean, it was really, if you can find it, you should watch it, because it's really entertaining. I wish those shows would get more recognition, but I guess it takes word of mouth these days now.
You call that during the Star Trek Wilderness years, which I feel we're still in, by the way. Thank you very much. But when there was nothing, like when there was only the Kelvin movies, if anything. Because there was a period, 2006, 7, and 8, where there was no Star Trek at all.
Yeah.
And then, and a lot of those shows became a thing during that time. But anyway, so the next episode was called Practice in Waking, where the Enterprise came across another sleeper ship, where Decker, Scotty, and Sulu get trapped in a simulation of 16th century witch burnings. And is it me, or does that sound like an animated series episode, just the way it's conducted? Because animated series tended to follow storylines like that, much more elaborate things you couldn't do on TV.
And wasn't it like a season 3 kind of theme? And there was where Kirk ends up in some, like colonial period where they're burning witches or something like that. Remember?
Oh, the Atavachron one.
The Atavachron, yeah. Wasn't that an issue there they had in that?
Yeah, one thing about the ones I'm seeing on Phase 2 is they're sort of kind of extending on ones they did in TOS in the early scripts.
Yeah.
But, not in the Naked Now kind of way. I mean, these weren't produced, so I don't know what would have happened, but these were just early scripts, so they may have changed them. But another one was that Deadlock, which is that's another one. The Enterprises were called to a star base to engage in a strange war game. Yeah, and that title was used for Voyager.
Yeah.
And it was a Kazon one.
Yeah. Yeah, the yeah, flip. Yeah,
The little joke we have about Seska. So
boring K's on Seska.
I think it was a Seska one, if I remember too. So because I saw Deadlock, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm not sure if I want to do a podcast on that because that's gonna be a remote click most of it. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, the next one was called Savage Syndrome. How TOS is that name?
Yeah.
Savage and Syndrome. They love to use those words in TOS-y names.
Yeah, that's true.
That just sounded TOS-y. That's the name of that. So, they found this ancient starship and they were hit with a blinding light that reduced the crew to savages, which actually sounds like the Day of the Dove in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's sort of repeating a lot of storylines I can see from, like I said, if I research this book, there's probably a lot more, because there's actually whole stories about those episodes in here.
Yeah.
Whole stories. They're not scripts, but they're whole stories. So,
Yeah.
I think maybe there's some script elements. And, of course, the next one is Devil's Due, which they did do for the Next Generation.
Yeah.
And there's one here called Our Unheard Melody Suite, where the Enterprise goes to a planet in search of men, which reminds me of a Voyager episode where Harry Kim gets sent to this planet where they basically have to drain men of energy to, give birth or whatever, which goes back to the animated series where they did. We'll wait for that blog. Okay, we'll wait for that podcast to do that one. But the animated series dealt with stuff like that too. But now, what I wanted to talk about that was interesting was an episode that, again, another Klingon battle cruiser where they find one life form aboard, a guy named Lord Bobby from the 19th century, except he's apparently supposed to be an alien. And his name is Lord Bobby, so they call the episode Lord Bobby's Obsession. And he's obsessed over this woman who's British on the ship, and they share this interest in the 19th century. But she can't accept he's an alien, and I guess that's the nature of the episode. But I was reading about that one in here somehow, and it mentioned in that episode that it seemed to imply the Klingons were visiting Earth during the 20th century in saucer-shaped spaceships.
Mm-hmm.
So they were trying to bring kind of the modern UFO thing into Star Trek. So I found it interesting that they were using that. The Klingons were coming to Earth in saucer-shaped ships as scouts in the 20th century. That was a part of that episode. Apparently, they were going to do that.
It just seems odd that Klingons would design something like a saucer shaped vessel.
Well, like I said, apparently Phase 2 is very Klingon-centric. If I read it, they're the only aliens that ever appear. I never hear Romulans on this show.
Because I think of all the Klingon ships we've ever seen in Star Trek over the 50 years, and they're not anything like smooth or rounded.
Klingons usually are into bird-shaped ships.
Sharp and daggery and
violent.
And they're made ugly looking.
Because everything with Klingons is like we got to be violent or predatory. Nothing's going to look beautiful or peaceful.
Yeah.
So the next one is an episode called To Attain the All, where the Enterprise gets caught up in a solar system-sized logic game where if you win, you attain all, which basically ended up getting revamped in Deep Space Nine, if I understand.
And that one episode you like the
Step 4, Alan Moraine. I had to go there with the who's it? Isn't that guy who played the game master there was in another show you watched?
Oh, yeah, and I can't now that you bring it up, I can't even think of the friggin' name of it now.
Maybe you'll figure it out, and then you'll be Alan Moraine, Track 3, or whatever.
I've seen him on so many different TV shows and stuff over the years. I mean,
Move Along Home was the name of the episode in the game. Move along, Track 3, move along home. So basically, it was that kind of thing where they're a game, but I just can't see Kirk and Sulu and Zahn doing little hopscotches. Alan Marine, count to 4. This isn't logical. So anyway,
they had him tap dancing around spots.
Oh, you had to bring that up.
So nothing really would have surprised me.
It could be a season 3-ish kind of thing.
Yeah. So there was opportunity there for Kirk to really act like a Korean,
Well, I'm just wondering how Shatner would have been, because this series would have been produced right after Kingdom of the Spiders. So I'm just trying to think if Shatner would have been just as nutty as he was in season 3 of POS. If
it had called for it, he would have done it. I'm sure.
Yeah, he could be a trip sometimes, huh? Okay, the last script written was an episode with a title that sounds a little verbose: "The War to End All Wars." Now, this is actually a discarded script from something else that actually had to do with aliens who were warring, and the Enterprise rescuing a female android whose name was Yira. And I just realized that an anagram of that is Yar.
Hmm.
Who knows? But anyway, whose planet's philosophy is peace through war. And it's been...
Sounds like our philosophy.
Right, so that could have been an interesting kind of political themed episode.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have brought the Asian brush wars of the 20th century.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see how the coded language they had to use in TOS.
I wonder if they would have had, if they could actually save Vietnam. And
well, there was 77, so the war had been over a couple of years, so they probably could use that term. So those are basically the episodes. I mean, there's more in here, but again, little motion picture, bad research alert, bad research alert. So, my bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the basic episodes. We can speculate what we're going to do with them. I mean, actually, you know what? Would it be kind of interesting to go and do more detail? Do you have this book?
You know, I keep wondering if I have it or not. I'd have to look because I got so many Star Trek books I can't even remember what the hell I got now.
Yeah, I got a whole closet full of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep them because I'm sure there are things in there that I can't find readily online, so I just keep them free.
Yeah.
Of course, a lot of those 90s books on Star Trek, if you remember, they had really thin, stringy binding. They fell apart after a few pages.
Yes, I know. I hate that.
The Star Trek encyclopedias of mine all fell apart like that. Because they did is they tied these with string after a while.
Yeah.
Like tie them up with string. This is glued in, so it's probably a little stronger, but the string ones always unraveled and fell apart. That's why I had pages fly out. My last Star Trek encyclopedia I get was that blue one.
Yeah.
After about 4 or 5 readings of that thing fell right to pieces.
Yeah.
If I ever find it again, I'm gonna dip the cover in transparent aluminum.
And the money that they ask for, and it falls apart
like
$30
sets.
Yeah, I mean, you don't pay that kind of money and have the damn thing fly apart on the first time you open it. I mean,
yeah, I mean, well, also I didn't get the hardback edition either, so
yeah,
you know, I mean, if I ever see the hardback edition of that encyclopedia, I'll just pick it up and say, the other one in the recycling.
You know, I'm at the point now where, you know, books, I'm just gonna have them on my iPad or something to read them because it takes up so much space.
Up. They pile up, and
and it weighs like a tree, like you're carrying a tree around when you got it all in a box. I mean, try to lift it, you have to be like
this alone is a heavy book.
Yeah.
I mean, I like having it. It's good to flip through as a reference, but that's why I didn't that's why I didn't buy this thing originally, because I had so many books. I had all the tech manuals and everything. We could do a whole podcast on Star Trek books, you know. I mean,
I mean, Samuel Cogley can have his damn books, but, you know, geez, I hate to see that poor old man try to move his apartment from one place to another with all the books he's got.
Yeah. You know, now you mentioned it. Anybody out there want to get the real knowledge of Star Trek? It's books.
Books.
It's not in computers. It's in books.
Yeah.
Okay, my little literacy promotion thing for the day, Samuel Cogley style. Put it right in your face. You want the history of the world? It's in books. You're either an obsessive crackpot or Samuel Cogley, attorney at law. I go with both. I like that character. He was interesting and witty, but he was only one trick.
Well, you know what he needed in that apartment with his books? Cats. He needed to have cats.
He needed to be the
Doesn't he seem like a cat person to you? I mean,
he seemed like cats would own his whole room. Like, yeah, this is entrusted to my cat collection who take care of my books.
Yeah, I could see like cats sitting on top of the shelves, licking their paws, you know.
That was a cat room. That was definitely a cat room.
Yeah, that looked like a place where you'd find a lot of cats.
Yeah, like a professor's library with cats all over the place, and you know, maybe they didn't have enough money to bring the cats in. Yeah. Maybe cats didn't look like cats on film.
I don't know.
Could have tied 5 rats together.
They could have put some like fur, extra fur, make them look like alien cats or something. You know, they could have put.
Yeah, that definitely. Or put that little dogacorn thing from the.
Like a unicorn thing on the top.
Yeah, it needed some kind of furry pet in there. It seemed like it needed some animals hanging around, like cats or something. You're right, cats are a good.
Yeah, it just seemed when they were doing that pan where they would show his room, it just seemed like you were missing something.
There's books everywhere, half open, all piled up on the floor, and cats in them going. It would have made more sense. You know, and Kirk being, oh, what's up with your cats, you know?
Yeah, you can see, like, trying to avoid stepping on the cattails around them.
That would have kind of added some humor to that scene that wasn't already there anyway.
Yeah.
But we're back to TOS again, but on to phase 2, it sounds like, you know, like with TNG, if you remember with TNG in the beginning, They were kind of trying to make sure you remembered it was Star Trek, so they were kind of repeating a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how long season 1 after that, if the show would have found itself. Because think about it. If Phase 2 had been a 7-year-long series, it would have run into the 80s. 82, 83. So.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you'd done that,
I wonder if they'd have done something Wrath of Connie for a story in Phase 2. You know? You think they might have done like a let's see Khan again or something?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of a Phase 2 version of those wires falling. Or it would have been
more obvious that it would look like clutter, you know, just.
Yeah, if they did it on TV, it probably looked like somebody just opened up a VCR and just dropped it on Khan's head. Like, boom, bunch of circuits falling on us.
I can imagine how cheap that would have looked on television. I mean, without.
In '82, they could have probably made it look a little more convincing, but
maybe.
You know, yeah. I'm just trying to think of that effect on a TV screen at that time.
But I just think what a Star Trek Wrath of Khan would look like on Phase 2.
Well, you know, that gives us modeling an idea. Phase 2 Reliant, what would that look like?
Yeah, would they have just used another Connie or, you know, for the Reliant?
I mean, it's a Kip Dash refit Connie anyway, so.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have just used one of these refit, retcon, whatever.
They probably could have had money to make more models, some different spaceships, you know, that they couldn't have done, you know.
Right, because I think, if I understand, wasn't the show going to be a little bit higher on the hog money-wise and higher budget than the original one?
Yeah, I mean, you could tell by the sets they built for it that it was going to be more expensive.
So they could have actually made some other Starfleet ships, so, you know, you didn't see, I don't think it would have been Red Dot Klingon ships.
No, geez,
and
no.
You probably wouldn't have had ships like that Tholium thing.
They would have been laughed because, you know, you had Battlestar Galactica, which were doing some.
Right, they had to have, because, you know, Star Wars, again.
Yeah, they would have had to match what everybody else was doing, yeah.
I mean, Flash Gordon, they had that, not Flash Gordon, but Buck Rogers, they had that coming up. Well, that was later, that was 79, but they could have had that. They had Battlestar Galactica, they had Space 1999.
Yep.
They had to up the ante and up the game.
Yeah.
So,
they had to match
you know what would have been kind of cool, though, in Phase 2? To see some of what later became the FASA ships appear.
Yeah.
They could have brought in some of the FASA ships, because a lot of those FASA ships would have been great in Phase 2.
Yeah, I mean, they could have
licensed with FASA and had them design the ships, and
they had books and books of ideas for different starships. You know.
I had all those books too. You know, you could get these, and some of the ships could be ones that could be easily produced on a TV screen.
Yeah.
That D Space Freighter that they had on the one they used in the Next Generation about 1 million times in Star Trek 3.
Yeah.
That could have been very workable in Phase 2.
Yep.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of things they could do. We could see different spaceships. It wouldn't be dots or some reuse of something we've had 1,000 times, you know, or something like that. And you probably wouldn't have had that thing they had in Spock's brain.
Oh, yeah, that rocket, Pigs in Space rocket ship.
Whenever I see that online, I always laugh at it and think I'm going to see Miss Piggy appear on the screen. But they changed it, so I'm happy.
It's funny that, you know, Miss Piggy and the Pigs in Space
right,
was wearing the costume look just like what they were wearing on that episode, the girls. When they,
right, the Imorgs.
Yeah, the Imorgs, yeah.
I mean, I wonder why they didn't just do that with Pigs in Space and have them have those things on their arms, you know. It didn't look like those. Maybe they actually got the idea for the Pigs in Spaceship from the freaking TOS.
I mean, they were trying to do a parody of Star Trek with the Muppets. You know, that's what they were doing. The
Well, I think the joke is that Scotty was sitting there, dead serious, like, oh, isn't she a beaut? That iron engine, it's like a Pigs in Space.
yeah. Just
at the end of the day, the Pigs in Spaceship is basically just a big Coke bottle.
Yeah. And
that's what that ship was. It was like a bottle with a bunch of stuff on it.
Yeah, just painted silver, you know, was
and
all.
Scotty's sitting there acting it to pieces like this is some great thing, and it looks like a bottle, like a Pigs in Space retcon. They changed it to look cool in the remaster, but.
Oh yeah, thank God they actually did something with that to justify Scotty's reaction. I mean, poor guy. I don't, you know, he had to just look at a blank screen and just pretend he could see something, and then they put that in the spot.
Well, I know Eagle Moss has made a model of that one that they used in the remaster. But I would love to just get an old plastic bottle or something, make that little Pigs in Space version, just to kind of be funny. Like, this is what it really looked like.
When Eagle Moss runs out of ideas, I bet you they'll
They'll
make
have that Pigs in Space style.
I bet you they will. I bet you they will. When they run out of ideas, they're coming to the end. They can't make anything else.
Well, I know a lot of fans built that ship from The Way to Eden, that Tholian ship with the stupid little nacelles on it.
I've seen that too.
But the point is, I don't think Phase 2 would have had anything that looked like that. I think the ships would have looked a lot more sophisticated. They would have had to.
Yeah.
We probably would have seen other ships in the Klingon fleet too.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it would have been kind of cool to look at.
They did take the existing Klingon ship model that they had for the TOS era, and they fixed it up so it looked like the way it did in the motion picture. So that's actually the same model. That's
what it would look like in Phase 2 too.
I don't know if they would have gone as far as that to dress it up, but they probably would have made it look a little more surface detailed for the new series.
It would look sort of like the D7 did in Remastered, where they detail the surface a little bit more.
Yeah, probably like that. They wouldn't have gone way over like they did for the movie, but they probably would have done something like that. Or
Now the Tenga class, is that separate from the D7? I was never sure.
Yes, it's like the how can I say it? It's like when they upgraded the Enterprise to.
It was like the Connie refitted. They're all built from the same ships. They're just retconned.
Yeah, just refitted. Yeah.
But they originally started as D7s.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, they could have built a whole new ship for that movie, actually.
Yeah.
They did for TNG with the Vorsha and the Nikvar, I think it's called.
Yeah.
But, like I said, the thing about Klingons, they can look pristine on the outside, almost majestic, and then on the inside, they still look all old and...
Yeah, it looks like the inside of a dumpster. I mean,
except Amar looked pretty nice.
Yeah, it did.
Maybe that was a brand new ship. They put a brand new bridge on. They didn't have some old bucket with all these things hanging off,
Yeah.
And it wasn't as smoky as ones on TNG is. I mean,
no,
I'm wondering if
it still looks alien enough to, sell the idea that this is not human. It's just, and I don't understand why they had to cheapen it further, later. And maybe it was because of money. Maybe that was reason.
I would have thought with Klingons being as honorable, they would have had much more ritualistic looking ships with more rounded lines and more Klingon symbols everywhere. But instead they gave it this old metal bucket look with all this smoke everywhere. It looked like a factory.
Yeah.
That violated every standard Earth would have had. It looked like some sort of power plant.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when they had those aliens on Voyager the Malon.
Mm-hmm.
They did the same thing, but it made sense they were garbage men.
Yeah.
The Klingon ship was like garbage scows. And then I always found it funny that guy in Tribble said, "Oh, the Enterprise should be hauling garbage." I'm like, the Klingon ships look like they're hauling garbage and you look inside them. All smoky and
they're already there.
But if you saw the Klingon ships on TOS, they always had some like mesh screen and people walking around behind it. They look kind of cleaner.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think the only time we ever actually see the inside of any ship that looked like was when they had that third season where they encountered the Romulans, like in the second or third episode where they had the Romulans were using Klingon ships.
When we saw the Klingon ship later, we didn't actually see the inside of them.
Yeah, it wasn't until then we actually get to see what the inside of one of those might look like, and it didn't look anything like that. But of course, the Romulans had it, so maybe they fixed it up different or something.
The Romulans seemed like cleaner ships.
Yeah.
They're blockier and more imperialistic, but they're definitely cleaner.
Yeah.
Then again, we haven't really seen the inside of a Vulcan ship much, have we?
No.
Ferengi ships always have the little ball. They have the little ball they use.
Yeah.
But what are Vulcan ships are like? We saw the inside of the Vulcan ship that landed in Carbon Creek, but it was kind of dark and you couldn't really see much of it.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if Phase 2 had given us more of a window into what the Star Trek universe was, rather than just the Enterprise and everything else is just who cares.
I think they would have been able to, like you said, they were given a lot more money to work with, and I think they could have made some better sets for different storylines and stuff, and they could have probably really showed us some insides of the ships we couldn't see in the original series.
Here's my big speculation, though. If Phase 2 had happened and say went off the air in 83, 84, in 7 seasons or whatever, do you think Star Trek The Next Generation would even have happened?
Depending on how popular Phase 2 was at the end, they might have came back and done a spin-off.
What I'm thinking is, I don't know if the Star Trek movies would have happened the same way.
Movies. They probably wouldn't have done movies unless they could use the original cast, because they were the only ones doing Star Trek at the time. They didn't have a Next Generation or anything like that. So
Right.
They
So,
had to pull him off of TV to put him in the movie cinema. I don't know that.
do you think after a while Nimoy would have wanted to return to the show, or do you think that would have been just no?
Well, I read somewhere where Nimoy was reluctantly agreed to like do an appearance every now and then on Phase Two. I don't know if there's how much truth there is to that, but I know he didn't want to come back. But I think they kind of made some arrangement where he could make a guest appearance every now and then on Phase Two. But I don't think Nimoy really had that much interest in coming back to Star Trek. I mean, they really had to pull his ears, basically to come back for the motion picture.
Pull
But
his
I
ears
think,
in, pull his ears out.
yeah, and in the second movie, he said he only was going to come back unless they killed him off. So he really didn't want much more to do with it. I think he's
Yeah, because that was during his basically trying to establish himself as not being Spock in the end of the day.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he had been so many years since he had played the character. I think he just closed the book on it when the show went off the air. So I just, going back, so he probably reminded him of times not wanting to remember, basically.
Yeah, the fact that he wasn't able to be with his family as much as he wanted to, and some of the harassment that they kind of incurred because of different elements of the show. But yeah, and here's the thing: if Phase 2 had gone on, would Star Trek, do you think, have ever been even considered to be a movie thing? Do you think it would have just stayed permanently TV and not made movies at all? Ever?
If they'd have done movies that had been after the series was over, probably, then they might have done a movie, but it depends on how popular it was. I mean, if the show failed, then there probably wouldn't have been any interest for movies. But if it ended on a high note,
if the show had gone like a 5 or 6 year, like 7 year, like the other Star Treks did, like in the mid '80s, could you imagine Star Trek: The Motion Picture coming out in like '89?
It probably wouldn't have been the same story because they'd already done it.
I mean, it would have been Star Trek 5 for sure.
Thank God.
But like
I don't know what they would have done. If they'd have tried to do a movie, maybe they'd. I think maybe they'd have done a spin-off of Phase 2 with a different crew and all that. If it got popular, I think they probably would have tried the spin-off thing.
I'll tell you one thing about Star Trek, Phase 2. If they had done it, it would have basically, only been an 8-year wilderness period rather than an 18-year one like it ended up being.
Yeah.
On TV. Now, when I say that, I mean, obviously we had the motion picture 79, we had movies, but we had to wait from 69 to 87 to do, Next Generation. So there would have been a series. If Next Generation had in fact happened, we would have had a series in the 70s and 80s. So there wouldn't have been a long wilderness years.
Yeah.
But the series of Star Trek might have been shaped in a very different way. I mean, Phase 2 might have totally shaped the canon in a way that, for all you know, Next Generation might have happened, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
It might have been a wholly different look. I mean, Phase 2, from the look of it, could have easily changed the way Star Trek's perceived.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
It's like one of those alternate realities in Star Trek. What if, you're like a quantum reality. In some quantum reality, Phase 2 happened.
You could actually kind of, also you could kind of edge Phase 2 theoretically into that, taking Decker and Ellie out, of course, into that 5-year mission that Kirk was on, after the motion picture.
Yeah.
Because didn't you say he went on a 5-year mission with the Enterprise crew after that?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, you could have, like you said, you could have started Phase 2 right after that first movie. You could have done it.
That would have been interesting to have the movie come out and then have Phase 2 be based on that movie.
Yeah.
And then have a show in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And what they could have done is they could have had like the Wrath of Khan as like a movie of the show and then come back to the show. And
yeah, that's
X-Files did that, remember?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean,
and then they came back to the show and they fit the movie into the show.
That's right. Yeah, X-Files. Yeah.
So they could have done started on 1980. They could have done a Phase 2 thing, had it go on until about 87, and they still could have picked up with Next Generation right after.
So in reality, I guess it must have hinged on money, but in reality, they really didn't have to drop that project when Star Wars came out. They could have done the series and then did a movie, and then continued the series, done another movie. They could have done it periodically like that.
What they could have done is they could have done a Phase 2 series and, kind of worked into the Wrath of Khan in the series.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they could have brought Sapphic into it early on.
Yeah.
They could have done a lot of things. I mean, but like I said, that would have been an interesting idea too, to have, that 10-year wilderness period, then have the motion picture, and then they decided to go the movie route with the old cast, and then they decided to do Next Generation. But it would have been a totally different Star Trek landscape, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really would. I mean, it would have been a lot broader, especially with the original characters, because I don't think there would have been a whole lot of wanting to look back or do prequels or anything like that. I think they would have just carried on more of a lineage. You know what I'm saying? Not just have all these big gaps in time between the movies.
Theoretically, Discovery or Enterprise, there may not have been much interest in those shows.
Yeah.
Star Trek just might have gone on, and they just might have done different shows in different times and just gone on. So, like I said, we're filling in gaps now.
Next Generation would have happened probably with a whole different cast in the 90s. I mean, it would have just been a different kind of show. That would have been different too. Different actors and stuff like that.
It gives me a thought of a weird alternate Star Trek history. What if they had Kate Mulgrew in command of the Enterprise D?
Boy, that's gonna turn some people's heads there.
Or Cisco.
Cisco is. It certainly would have gave Cisco a different flavor, because without that prophet.
Right, and now we're getting into alternate Star Trek history here. About alternate Star Trek universes. We're talking about alternate histories of Star Trek on TV.
Yeah.
Like, maybe somebody should write a book like that. Like, what would it have been like if Star Trek went another way with Phase 2?
Yeah.
What was the Next Generation? Would Voyager and DS9 even happen?
Yeah. I mean, if these studios want to do something original, why don't they just do that? Let's just say, let's show an alternate reality of where Star Trek would have been if we'd have done Phase 2, and then just do it,
that could actually be like an interesting fan movie. Like, what if we done Phase 2 in the 70s?
And then we just visit some of these ideas and and recast things, and I mean that'd be interesting.
But the bottom line is, in our quantum reality we live in, I mean, you got to figure out, what are you and I like in other quantum realities? Scary thought, isn't it?
I couldn't get along with myself in any reality.
Like I said, who knows? In another quantum reality, you may have no resemblance to you whatsoever.
And maybe, yeah, true. I don't even know who the hell I am.
You may look like you, but for all I know, you could act more like Ricardo Montalban or something.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine you being on a podcast and be like, you tasked me.
That's me.
You tasked me. I should have you. You're fed up. Could you imagine you being Mr. Rourke, basically? I mean, just imagine us with different personalities, When I watch that mirror universe, sometimes I think of what we'd be like in other quantum realities if the events had changed, if things had been different. Those are interesting things to speculate about, But the thing is, with Star Trek, you got to wonder how that would have altered history. It's really true but the reality of it in our quantum reality is that Phase 2 was continued by the fans, more or less. They made those gaps filled in.
Yeah.
Now, I know. Is any of that fan stuff considered canon at all?
Well, no, but if it depends on how much you like Star Trek. If you look at the stuff and it looks good to you, and it doesn't, I mean, and those fans are faithful to canon when they made this stuff.
Right, they're very prime-ish.
Yes, and the thing is, even though they didn't, they're just using money of their own to make this stuff. The ideas that are working with, the story ideas, are very, very legit, very canonish in a way, and.
I hate to wax sentimental on us, but is it weird that you and I remember a time where there was never a word like Prime Universe in Star Trek?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Up until 2009, there wasn't such a word. It was just Star Trek. You had the Next Generation as part of it, but there was no alternate realities. Now it's a Star Trek multiverse.
Yeah, I know. We're like copying DC and Marvel's multiverse thing. We got all these different Flashes, and because there's like that. I don't know if you watch the Flash. They got like 7,000 different versions of the Flash, and they all kind of interact in each other's worlds and stuff. And it's like,
right. And, with multiverse plot lines, they get to be alternate timelines that are just confusing. And Star Trek has already done that, beaten that to death. So we need to focus on one little.
Yeah.
But Phase 2 at least would have given us a lot more ground. I mean, even if they'd done Phase 2 in the 70s and early 80s, and they'd gone on to do Next Generation after that, that would have given the Federation a lot more weight, a lot more growth.
Yeah.
So you would have, either way, it would have, like you said, expanded out the universe a lot more.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind if they even made Star Trek series and they just say at the beginning, this is an alternate reality of Star Trek, and just Just say it. Just say, yeah, this is alternate.
Well,
I'd still watch it, even if it doesn't look anything like it
like I said, they get around that in a very weird way, like saying this is based on Star Trek, created by
Yeah,
Gene
you could still
Roddenberry.
say it's based on Star Trek, but you just say this is another version of a Star, another timeline of Star Trek.
But they did that with Voyager too. They call that based on Star Trek, but that's considered Prime, I think.
Yeah, and
Enterprise is considered Prime, I think.
yeah, I mean, you can.
PS9 is Prime, I think.
So there, I mean, I don't know why that these studios are shying away from saying that. No, this can be acceptable and not be Prime. I mean, just because it looks different or something like that, let's just say that technology advanced differently in this timeline.
Am I in a feedback loop by saying this, or do we always end up in these podcasts talking about the messed up state Star Trek is in today?
Well, it's because we have this need to try to fix what is, and and it's unfortunately for us, we don't have much say in it, and it's really the powers that be, the suit and ties over there at Paramount and CBS.
Well, like I said, I don't want to come across with a viewpoint of jealousy or anything.
It ain't jealousy. It's just frustration that these people are just walking all over things, and they're
never
not.
mind us. They've got the accent on people who could be helping them out. So I don't know why they're not talking about
I mean, if these people over there who don't have all the power of Paramount and CBS behind them can do something and make it look right, what excuse do they have?
You know what?
To do what they're doing and make
theoretically an idea that I had that would have been really cool is they could actually still do Star Trek Phase 2 today. They could make the Enterprise now, but instead of bringing back a new Kirk or a new Spock, they could keep the Zahn character but bring in a whole different captain.
Yeah.
A whole different crew and do it that way.
Yeah, just have the Enterprise in it and everything, and just a different crew.
But keep it Prime-ish. I mean, have that kind of fill in a gap if you want. But again, it's the idea of a simulation versus a simulacra, as I've heard discussed a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to retcon everything when there's no need to. But anyway, I guess that's Star Trek Phase 2, and I guess it gets into a conversation of how this bizarre parallel universe thing Star Trek's in now, and the fact that if Phase 2 had happened, would that even allow for much room for this kind of thing to happen in the first place? Because who knows? They might have done things in Star Trek Phase 2 about Discovery's era, which would have countered what that show is doing now.
Yeah.
So, and if the Enterprise looked like it did in the original script, bye-bye Discovery, wouldn't have happened.
I mean, remember I told you like a week ago how the motion picture was originally going to end, with the
Klingons,
Yeah. Well, the saucer section would have been left, would have been the escape module for the crew. I'm wondering if that was originally plotted in Thy Image, and that
you kind of imply it in this book that they were going to do that in the end of In Thy Image.
And maybe when they bring the ship back again, it had a whole new secondary hull, and it looked like that Discovery bottom down there. That maybe they salvaged the saucer.
Even more so, if you look at this Enterprise on the front, the saucer is basically the TOS one.
Yeah, it does. It looks just.
So I'm wondering if in Thy Image it would have started out the TOS Enterprise.
Yeah.
Basically, and then when they took the saucer off, if that's the secondary hull they put on it.
Could have been.
Because that saucer is basically the old TOS one.
Yeah.
So maybe they just retcon the bottom.
Yeah.
Because the saucer was not like the Next Generation one. They had to have a professional put a new one on.
That's right.
So like I said, it could have started with a whole TOS ship the way it was, and then they would have put that hull on, and they would have given it a whole refit.
Yeah.
But we don't know. They never produced it, so, But, so anyway, is there anything?
It's all the possibilities that were lost, really, and it's
right. It's just speculation at the end of the day what would have happened.
Yeah, it's sad in a way, though. I mean, you didn't get to see it happen.
Yeah,
but
but they made a fan series, and we can always write our fan fiction and put it into it. So, Phase 2 is the Star Trek that never was at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I guess I don't feel so bad. I was worried about research in the beginning of this video, but there really isn't a whole lot. I mean, there's this talk in here, but like I said, it's a little mystery. They didn't do it. They put the hammer down it and decided to take the motion picture route, and here we are. So.
Yeah. I mean, I like the pictures they put in the book that they show, the things. Those are pretty interesting. How you could see where they kept a lot of that design when they brought the movie. They just took certain parts out and added more things.
Yeah, like those big round things on the engine, which still have a TOS kind of look to it. They kind of got rid of those and give it a.
And they added more stuff on the bridge.
And hey, you never know if the if Phase 2 had gone on, it might have evolved to look more like a motion picture anyway.
Yeah, I'm
It
sure
might
it
have
will.
just evolved it that way because it was going that way anyway. So
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, this ship right here is the direct link between the refit and the original Connie.
Yeah.
So I mean, they that could go easily to the refit ship.
Yeah.
Didn't you even speculate that you think that the Connies that were made while the original were out on the 5-year missions probably look more like that anyway?
Yeah, I think, that's the theory that I got, that maybe some of the Connie ships that were made were slowly being refitted, and I think there were probably some that looked like that a little
After the
bit.
original 12, I mean, that they sent
Yeah.
out.
They probably had parts that were, older parts and then combined with newer parts, and, as time went on, and they
Kind
just
of retconning again.
Yeah, I mean, in the Enterprise, they just gave it the full refit, and the other ships didn't get the full treatment yet, and they did eventually over the years, and so, who knows?
So, is there anything you wanted to add about Phase 2 that we haven't covered aside from the lack of research that I don't feel so bad about?
I don't know. I mean, it's like I like to visit Phase 2 every now and then, just like you reminisce over possibilities, and you can draw a lot of inspiration from that to write stories. I know I do whenever I think about it and I look at those pictures and stuff, and it just gives me ideas and things like that. It's a good area to just kind of explore in, what they could have done when you was talking about some of the episodes and things they were coming up with. There's a lot there to just kind of feed into your imagination.
Right. And you can speculate on possible alternate quantum realities, because if that theory that the multiverse theory, they call it now, what a sloppy name. I prefer quantum reality. Sounds more elegant and scientific.
Yeah.
But yeah, in another quantum reality, Phase 2 happened.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine that quantum reality, us doing weekly podcasts on Phase 2? Who knows? That quantum reality may be absolutely awesome compared to this one. Who knows?
Yeah, it's still going strong.
I mean, it's funny, and that's one thing about TV today. If they explore alternate realities, they're always really bad ones that are worse than ours.
Yeah, I know.
This kind of dystopian other realities, because that's the whole thing these days, basically darkening everything up. But the reality is that what if another quantum reality was way better than this one? What if we were the dark one?
Yeah.
I
like
mean,
reverse psychology in a way. It's like justifying that, yes, we are living in bad times, and it could be better if we just dream of it, or something. Like we're just looking at this other reality that we can't ever get to, and it's better there. But yes, we are living in these dull and dreary times. We get.
But, if you start from dull and dreary, but if you look at something a little more hopeful, it's better than saying, "Oh, our reality is the most superior one."
Yeah.
But I guess
I think it's better to say that, things might be bad, but we can be better, and show a progression of later in the year.
That's why I was trying to imply that this may not be the ideal universe we think it is.
Yeah, it could be dystopian now, but
it could be, like I said, and sometimes I think about that too. In another quantum reality existing maybe right on the other side of our rooms here, in another dimension, what are our alternate selves doing? We could be practically in a Star Trek series for all we know.
And and the bottom line is, it's human beings that make it dystopian or nice, right? If you take human beings off the planet, the Earth is always going to be the Earth, no matter what. It's always going to be the same.
Well, there's a video on YouTube that talks about what if human beings all suddenly disappear.
Yeah. It would always be a paradise, but the minute you put humans in the thing, we either decide that whether the time is bad or whether the time is good, but we're the ones that's making the times good or bad.
Unfortunately, that also casts a very cynical view on the human race, unfortunately.
So if we stop making times bad and start making them good, then maybe we won't be thinking dystopian anymore.
Basically, is the old saying goes, this sounds very religious, I know. You make your own heaven and hell right here on Earth.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's all in our hands.
But like I said, so again, with Star Trek, whether it be Phase 2, Discovery, or whatever, we can do it in any way we like. We just have to make that commitment as Star Trek fans, whatever we're doing.
Yeah.
So anyway, you would call that a wrap on Phase 2?
Yeah, but I got a feeling we're going to revisit that at a later time.
Yes, I agree. And this time is going to be more... Actually, wouldn't it be a good idea to go over every episode as illustrated in here?
Yeah, I'd like to do that, and plus I'd like to see, I'd like to bring in an idea that you and I might have of things that we could do, or things that could have been done with phase two, like, you know, a story idea or something
like a
that.
phase two addendum.
Yeah, and you know, maybe the people watching could write something down in the comment section what they would have liked to have seen in phase two.
Yes.
Back then. That would be nice to go over other people's
Please
ideas.
comment more. You aren't commenting enough out there. I just, I know you're watching it. I see people are watching it, but please comment and save your troll for some other video who can deal with it, because I don't want to deal with it. So,
Yeah,
just,
I mean,
actually, just don't troll. Just don't troll out there. But anyway, the thing is that,
I mean, sometimes more feedback could give us ideas for a podcast.
But if you get a well-rounded thing, all those people over on Trek Yards who say good stuff, come over and get some good stuff to us, because there'll be some interesting ideas to, to expand on what we're doing. And, if you have an idea for an episode, there's a concept. If you have an idea for an episode that we haven't covered yet, a legitimate one, again, no trolling, pop it in there. Always good. So, to conclude this, subscribe, comment, please, especially if you're from the Trek Yards crowd. I know you're pretty good commenters. I've seen what they do. A big hello to Trek Yards, Stuart and Samuel again. I have been neglecting putting your videos in there. It's just the videos haven't always been applicable. But, like I said, we can, this is a phase two thing I saw you do, the phase two Enterprise. I can drop that in here. So anyway, next week, I believe we're doing the last Star Trek movie, Nemesis.
Yes, Nemesis, yeah.
Yeah, and then you had some ideas that you wanted to cover in the future, which we can kind of go into when we talk about Nemesis next week. So, on your end. But like I said, I want to revisit this phase two thing. I don't know if you have this book or if you found it, but...
yeah, I seem to think that I have it, but I got it somewhere and I can't.
I got to tell you, just before we end, about this book, I'd see this for years in Borders, and I'd pass it and pass it and pass it, because I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, this is the book I passed on, because I wanted Jip's stuff about technical manuals and starships, and this was more about like a distinct script, and I'm saying, I'll get it one day. So I get it like 18 years later. I find it in the budget bin, so.
You really waited, and you saved a lot of money, too, because of that.
It's a $17 book when it was new.
Yeah, it was.
And remember, when you went to Borders and stuff, these books were, whatever it said on the back. It's like 16. So when this came out in 97, I was on the Star Trek encyclopedias, because there was no internet in my life in those days. So,
yeah.
So anyway, that was Star Trek Phase 2. Should we call this kind of our initial dip into this?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to call it Part 1, because Phase 2, Part 1 sounds a little bulky, but, we could just do this Star Trek Phase 2 and then Star Trek Phase 2 Part next.
Part 2. Phase 2
Well,
Part
I was saying Phase 2 Part 2. It was like R2-D2. I just don't want it to sound like a Star Wars robot. Phase 2 Part 2. It sounds like. So, yeah, Star Wars it's going to come in, because every time you talk about science fiction of the 70s, Star Wars is just going to be there.
Yeah, it
is just your guiding post.
They're forever linked in a endless dance, the two.
And yes, and before they start trying to cross Star Wars and Star Trek over, which I'm starting to see coming here.
Oh God, please.
Yeah, I cringe at that. That would involve time travel in an epic proportion, honestly.
Yeah, it's not needed. It's not needed.
It's just, well, I mean, you could say they're almost doing that anyway, but that's another story. But anyway, until episode 37.
7? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I have trouble getting these numbers right from week to week, because we're up in the 30s and odd numbers. But anyway, until then, this has been Trek Prime on Trek Phase 2, I guess. And live long and prosper.